best way to start is kind of like to let you guys introduce yourselves and kind of give a brief overview of your story here and things like that, of that nature. That way I kind of know like how much I'll really talk about usually, because I don't want to spoil everybody and not have something good to read, you know?
Tina, you want to go first?
No, you go first, Ben.
Okay. I lost the draw on that. We're still trying to figure out who talks before who.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm Ben Lee. I do software out in Pasadena, California, and I took a stab at comic book writing and creating. So basically, I'm the co-creator and co-writer.
Awesome.
I'm Tina Cesa Ward. I'm the other co-part, co-creator, co-writer. I have done a little bit more comics, I guess, than Ben, because I just really love them. And even back, some time ago, I really wanted to work in comics, but I also do writing and directing for live action. So I've done a lot of series work. I work in developing TV shows here in LA. So I do a bunch of that stuff. And but I just love doing comics. So it was a good opportunity for me to jump on doing this series for me. So that's my short bit of.
No, that's awesome. That's a great background.
So I don't want to tell you more. Anyway.
Well, I mean, that's a great question. That's a great setup there, though, because Ben said this was his first experiment with comics, and it sounds like you've been a fan and you wanted to get into comics. So I guess how did y'all connect, and where did this whole idea come from for the Delegates? Or I guess also kind of give an overview of what the Delegates is, so people know what we're kind of talking about here.
All right, Ben, that's you.
Okay. I guess this was born, many, many years ago, where I just had a weird dream about I think I was just thinking about automation at that time was kind of like a new buzzy word in the early 2010s. And it just seemed like, automation was going to be the future. I mean, we're kind of seeing it progressing in certain ways, whether it's through automated vehicles or whatnot. And I just had a dream about what if we automated government? What would be the ramifications of that? And so from there, it was also mixed up with, at that time, it was an idea about, we don't get to really see a lot of stories taking place outside, beyond just in mainstream media. It's usually in America and Europe. And even though neither Tina nor I are Black or have, African descent, just felt like it would be really cool to, to respectfully have, portray an area that, sometimes gets misrepresented in mainstream media, and so, Tina obviously is much more accomplished in comics. I've dabbled a little bit in show business before that. I had written and directed a movie, and the idea that I had for this science fiction story, I knew I didn't have the budget for. So, and also it felt like it couldn't be done in just one movie. And so it seemed to make sense to try it in a serialized form, like in a comic book. And I mean, I've read comics when I was young, grew up with the 1990s X-Men, and, wanted to dive further into that media. And what better way than to try to write a story. And, Tina and I have a mutual friend, Allison. She was one of the producers of the movie, for my movie. And she had been working with Tina, which Tina can explain further. But that's how she made the introduction, knowing that Tina was kind of in the right place, right time in terms of trying something out like this.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's basically the small of it. Yes, I was done, and I had another series, and it was, going through its usual machinations of rewriting and all this other stuff, ready to, try to get in production. And I don't think and then it kind of didn't work out at the same time that Allison told me about Ben's project. And I was like, oh yeah, let me definitely want to talk to him. And it was great for me because it was in a genre that I've always wanted to work in, but I've never had the chance to work in, because most of the time I'm getting just kind of straight dramas kind of sent to me. I kind of just do more dramas, and I haven't had the chance to do sci-fi or anything outside of dramas. So it was an exciting chance for me to jump in and do that as well. And again, I was a big kind of lover of comics. I had one issue out of Guards of Dagmar, which is this other comic that I'm trying to get off the ground, and at the time. And so it was kind of, it was a perfect time for me to jump onto this. So
yeah, that sounds great. I mean, it sounds like y'all both kind of have a like a film background, and film writing is script writing is probably something y'all know a lot about. So that's one thing, like the film industry and like Hollywood and everything, they have like a very like standard scripting process for the most part, versus like comics where there's like almost no standardization on how you handle that. So how is y'all's writing process? Do y'all do a more Hollywood style script for the comic as well, or is it like a different process altogether for you?
in terms of like the format of the actual script, or us writing together?
Well, actually, I guess both elements of that, whatever you want to share about the process. Yeah.
I mean, we're definitely, we have a very, strict kind of script format. Obviously, it's not like a motion picture script, but it's like a panel to panel breakdown, as you would do for a comic book. Since I luckily knew a little bit about that, just had to bring it over to Ben and say how it should look. And then, for us working together, it was great. We would definitely, we had 6 issues make up an arc. And so we would sit down before an arc for a few weeks or something, and really spend, I don't know how many days a week we did it, but for a little while, and then would kind of really try to bang out what that arc was going to be, figure out what the characters were doing, figure out what the story was doing. And so once we kind of would bang that out and say, first issue should be really short bullet points, needs to be Marla doing this, or second issue needs to be OC, and, just really kind of short descriptions of what it would be. We, and so we knew, because we had an overall arc and stuff like that, so we would have to stick to the plot points. But oftentimes and then we would go off and write our own issues. And, sometimes we'd come back to each other and be like, hey, this is what I figured out while I was writing this. And then we would go, okay, I just have to adjust this in mine, and then we're all good. So we would try to write them at the same time, issues. But sometimes I feel like a little towards the end, I think we were writing, like I would write one, Ben would wait. Ben would write, I would wait, because it became very much like we would discover things while we were writing our issues. And so it would be like, if I was writing one after he was, it would be like, hey, I found this, and we had to go back and refigure everything. So it just ended up being that it made more sense for us to do it that way, because we would have a lot of stuff we would discover once you dive into writing the actual issue. So, which was a lot of fun. It was fun to have, know what your issue needs to be, like what are the plot points you need to get to, but then just kind of be left to your own imagination on how you're going to tell all of that. So it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, when I first met Tina, when we were discussing the project, like in my head, I think I had already had an idea that it was going to be 30 issues. That was it. There was going to be a definite beginning, middle, and end. And so that helped create, this framework. And from there, it became like, as how she described it, we take things into small, manageable chunks, and it was a great balance of like we know where we're going. We just don't know how we got there.
Yeah.
And gave us the space to discover things, kind of go, go a little bit off script, so to speak, and see where that led us. And it was, I kind of like a writer's room, I guess. And I've never really been in a writer's room.
Yeah, definitely in the beginning when we're mapping out the whole arc, that was definitely us just sitting in a room figuring that out, and then just go write your issues, and that's how it kind of came about. But
that's really interesting to me though, because it all comes through as one voice. Like, I'm surprised to hear that y'all are writing different parts, because everything comes through, like, it's very consistent. The characters are very consistent. Yeah, and I noticed, like, as I was reading, it would be like issue 1 was written by, I think it said Ben Lee, and then like the second issue says by Tina, and I was like, well, maybe they were just swapping credits back and forth, because it felt so cohesive. I thought y'all had really sat down and put a lot more work in together at the same time, which, I mean, there's all the like planning and structuring and outlining that happens together, but to hear that y'all wrote these issues separately is really impressive, because it all flows so well.
Oh, well, that's a huge compliment. Thank you. I mean, it's it all kind of goes down to us really understanding who those characters are. And we had certain things in the language that we always had to stick to. I think that helped us. Like each character had a certain language. I think that helped as well. But yeah, that's always the goal, is we don't ever want it to seem like a Tina issue or a Ben issue. We want it to seem like just another issue of Delegates. So that's great to hear. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, I was really impressed with it. I thought it was really cool stuff. I guess, like, to kind of explain it, to me, it really popped off, I think, with issue 2, whenever they kind of make the reveal of the president, like, whenever that happens, because at first it just seemed like, I don't know, almost like a political thriller kind of thing. A lot of like espionage style stuff and like talks of plans, but once they actually like go on the run and she gets her arm exposed and stuff, like, at that point it turns into something more. And that's what I really liked about this. That's why I went back and read that first one twice, because I really like the way it unfolds, and I don't know, it almost feels like the conspiracy thriller or something, where like there's just layers and layers, and the more you unfold, the more you get, And so it started out just seeming like, okay, they're worried about like this coup or whatever, but then it's like, oh no, like, people believe in her, but now she's been exposed. So now they know that she's not a real human, and it brings everything she's ever done into question. And then they kind of get past that, and they have to deal with the fact that makes her very valuable to the rebels, and so now she's a commodity to a certain group of people, but she's also a hero to this other group, and then there's these other people that don't believe in her just because she's not human, So I guess it sounds like you kind of have this all planned out, so there might even be more layers to it, but how did you calculate all of that? How did you figure out that, like, you want to take this far and kind of keep rolling it out?
So we definitely appreciate the compliments, and it's, I guess, it's kind of funny pun to say, like, it's calculated, but it's one thing that we really, I appreciate you pointing out about, like, how there's different factions and different people with different sets of motivations and beliefs about how President Aminah should, whether she should continue to run the country or not. Because one of the things that I've noticed in science fiction, usually, especially with robots or androids, is either they're super hyper competent, like, Data from Star Trek, or they're just the Terminator, basically. So it's like, well, there's this giant room to play with where she can be good or she can be bad, and let's explore, like, how do people react to that? Would people buy that, like, that, okay, she's actually not human, but, we actually think she can still be a very good leader, it's, buying into that. And in terms of, kind of plotting out the different arcs, I think Tina and I, we came to the agreement about 5 arcs, I think. And so each chapter, arc or chapter, we kind of hit upon a couple of main beats and main ideas of how we want to expand. It made sense for the very first arc to focus solely on the main characters, with Marla and Osi and Aminah. And then it made sense to kind of open up a little bit. And, we're actually pretty far in the third arc right now in terms of with the artists. That one, we go international. So
nice.
you'll get to meet other delegates from 2 other countries and see how they behave, if they're similar or dissimilar to Aminah. And so, it's kind of like, and knowing that it was going to be only 30 issues gave us the luxury, gave us the freedom, that's this roadmap of saying like, okay, we definitely know we wanted to end this way. So how do we get there, and what meanderings can we take? Tina, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
No, I think that's about right. That's for sure. Yeah, and we knew who the core characters were, and so kind of knowing what Marla's, it's a lot of it is Marla's story, so it's knowing what her arc is throughout it, is really important for us, and a lot of the characters feed into her, and so we kind of followed that. I will say that Ben always, and this I think is always telling, Ben always was inspired a bit by Star Trek with this, and with that core group of people. And so we always made sure we had the kind of this core group that even Saito, like everybody has their own kind of spin on this and gives you different perspectives. So we always stuck with that core group, which, stays throughout the whole issue.
Well, like with Marla and perspectives, like you were talking about, right? I thought it was really cool that it takes place in Africa. And there's like a lot of African culture there, and like, you can feel it. Like it feels like a different place than the United States. But Marla doesn't, because she's American, And so, I mean, that's of course genius, because it kind of like gives an American reader like an insight and a perspective. But it's not just that she's American. Like the way that they play everything is it's always like she's the outsider, she's the American, and like we have to be careful what we say around her. She doesn't deserve an opinion. This isn't her home and stuff like that, And I thought that was just genius, because it begins everything and sets it up around this whole like moral gray area. Like she's the outsider, but she wants to save the president, and she doesn't trust the president's guards, and stuff like that. And so everything, like, I mean, it almost reminds me of like Fractals or something, where like it starts with these 3 characters like right there in the office, and they already have all this gray area and these different perspectives on things. And then as it moves farther and farther out, like you just keep getting, the perspective keeps changing more and more, And so I think that's really interesting that y'all tied it all to Marla, because it does. Everywhere they go, you get the American, like the American perception, and like what you would expect to feel like if you were an outsider in another country. So I guess my question coming out of all of that is like, how did you do that? How did you create a country and a world that feels like what I assume Africa feels like, or at least doesn't feel like America? Where did all of that come from? What kind of experience goes into writing something like that?
A lot of research. That's really the short answer. It is a lot of research. It really is us. I think Ben and I took a lot of time to really understand, Africa is a huge continent. So there's, all these different countries. And I think when we were writing it, we would say, okay, our made up country is like this real country. Like we would kind of in our heads have ideas of what our made up countries really are, so it kind of, so then we could actually go to those countries that exist in the real world and really research them. And then that would become Fulawodaabe or any other country that we go to, so that we had a good starting base of what we knew. Because it's obviously fictional. The countries are made up, all the characters are made up, but we wanted to make sure that it had some basis in truth, that it wasn't like completely just made up. We wanted to make sure the countries felt a little more real world than just completely made up. So a lot of research.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I would love to live in Wakanda, I mean, that's not a realistic, fictional African country.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Tina's right. I mean, I think there's like over 50 different countries on the continent. I mean, just so many different cultures, so many different histories that it would, and because as I've mentioned before, neither Tina nor I really are in the right position to write any quote unquote definitive African story. It would be absolutely disrespectful. So it made sense to tie it to Marla, an American. And I love how you pointed out, her feeling like an outsider. It is actually quite similar to a lot of folks who are just, either immigrated from one country to another, where, when I lived in Taiwan for a little bit, they treated me like an American. And for large parts of my, my life here in America, especially in school, I was the Asian kid, so yeah, it's very interesting. And definitely that was how we felt like we could respectfully, doing the research was part of it, but also, having the main character be American, kind of helped give us this ability to, still like say like, hey, we are the outsider, Marla's the outsider, there's a lot of things that she won't know and probably can never fully understand. And so we tried to tie her as the moral compass through the lens, that way. And yeah, just did our best to, respectfully portray, these regions and these, certain types of folks who, of rare everyday folks that live on that very large continent.
Yeah, no doubt. Why a fictional place? Why didn't y'all just set it somewhere that already exists?
I think it's, on my part, it's probably fear.
You don't want to get it too wrong.
I mean, I didn't, obviously, it probably would be hubris to expect like a comic, my humble comic book to like spark an international incident. You'd have to be extremely popular to do that. Yeah. But I think if it was based on a real country, I think there would be even more burden on us to get everything right. And so to have something that is grounded in realism, but still within this wiggle room of like, we get to make up the history, we get to make up who their neighbors are and what are the, previous administrations, yada, 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 that type of stuff. Hopefully we did a good job of, again, being respectful of certain areas of Africa and, and at the same time, still putting out a compelling story that feels like that could be believable, a believable country in Central Africa. And that was how we wanted, that was our goal.
Yeah. I mean, I assume that was at least, half the answer, but I also think it's really cool whenever you have like a fictional setting that's kind of an analog for something else. You can kind of like, I don't know, there's a lot of malleability to that, like having something like Gotham City or Metropolis for your character means that you can change the city to kind of match the tone of whatever story you're trying to tell. And so to me, like, of course, it's a lot easier not to get everything wrong whenever you're making up a place. But I think it's also great because like down the road, if the story is about something that only happens in a specific part of Africa, you don't have to go hop to another country. You can create a corner of your own country that fits into that mold, and so I think that's another interesting aspect to it is that setting it in that fictional setting, like you said, Africa's huge and there's like 60 countries. Well, now you can kind of cater different corners of where you've created to the different aspects of Africa without ever actually having to leave that made up place, you know?
Yep. For sure.
I feel like that's less of a question and more of a statement, but I just think it's like it's something that crossed my mind as I was reading, you know, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you took the words out of our mouth.
So I think one of the really cool aspects to the story, you know, beyond just like it being somewhere else and like interesting people and interesting characters, but the very concept, like there's this whole like delegate structure where they're basically like propping up governments and stuff with, you know, I guess the buzzword of the day is algorithms. So we'll go with algorithmic androids. You know, they're basically propping countries up based on like the data says this is the best way to run this country, you know, kind of thing. But the citizens are misguided. They don't know that these delegates are implanted. So to me, that's really interesting. And you kind of talked a little bit earlier, but I mean, what went into that? How much were you like, oh yeah, we need to or like it would be interesting to see what automation would be like. And I think you also mentioned you work in like tech areas and stuff. So I'm sure that plays into a little bit. What are your thoughts on this, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in software for now over 10 years on and off. So maybe perhaps, you know, I've read a few more, you know, articles about it before, you know, the average American has. But it's definitely very interesting to see the progression of it, because the very early days of automation, it was very much like, what's the word? But it was very optimistic. You know, it's like, look what this can do, you know? Mm-hmm. And by no means would I have thought of, or was I smart enough to know, like, you know, where like machine learning for like facial recognition sometimes has racial bias issues, or like, you know, automated, you know, like we can automate bots, and you know, there's issues with social media because of that. This and that. There's no way any of us could have, you know, predicted that stuff. But it was just like fascinating to kind of just dive into that, because at that time it was still a very nebulous and a very fantastical concept. You know, in terms of how we would let it, you know, how much it would play into the story, that was a little bit difficult, because again, like neither Tina nor I are, you know, algorithm experts. Neither of us have run a country before. And so like we had like, you know, in the very beginning discussions about, okay, what makes a great leader? And, you know, how could that, would there anything like that be quantified or something like that? We definitely didn't want to go into the super hard science fiction of it, where like we're displaying percentages and stuff like that, because in the end, it's about like, is the story entertaining, you know, regardless of the subject. Mm-hmm. It very much was like, well, let's think of situations where the algorithm probably would say one way, when us, the human, with our human intuition and instincts, would be like, no way would we do that. You know, the most, yeah. The most sound, you know, the average sound politician would never make that choice. And I think that would have been the fun challenge of trying to come up with some of those situations. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know, Tina, did I miss anything?
No, I think you're right. I think it really does come down to, there's always, you know, that idea of like, you know, if we had an android president, like, you know, they're making, you know, decisions not on emotions, but there is that idea of there's something that automation can't duplicate, which is, and how important is human instinct? I mean, this is the thing I think Ben and I talked about a lot, and it was, you know, how important is that? And it's something Marla, I think, thinks very much about too. So it's that whole idea, and even throughout the whole series, I think we never answer any of it. It's just the amount, you know, it's just putting that question out there, which mm-hmm. I think, you know, you can teach something to make the right or wrong decision based on past experiences. And then Aminah is always learning. So every experience she goes through, she's still gathering more and more information to make better decisions going down the line. but she'll never have instincts. She'll never have a gut feeling, which is something that, humans do have. And so, which is better? I don't know. So
I love it. I think it's great that you're like asking questions and not necessarily giving the answers, because that's kind of the point where it crosses into preachy, at least to me, is when you start telling people like technology is bad and you should stay away from your cell phone, like that's preachy. But whenever you're like making people think and question, like, not is it good or bad, but like how much of an effect is it having, that's when it gets interesting. And I think that's what you do a lot with this book, because the situation it's not, I don't even know how to say half the names, but is it Wikesa, some the leader of the rebels?
Yep, you got it.
The bandits. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like he like they kind of turn on him and they're gonna kill him, right? Or she could let him die for like the good of everybody, but then like Marla kind of steps in like, yo, like nobody's got to die, because again, that gut feeling. I thought it was a really cool situation to express exactly what you're describing, is like, how do you find a good balance point for what would an algorithm do that we wouldn't, even though the algorithm would think that it's doing right, so
yeah.
I'm assuming y'all have a lot more scenarios like that down the road.
Yes. Indeed, we do. We have a lot of fun things down the road. It's our issue 15 comes out this week or next week?
Oh, it comes out this
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday, January 6th. So
yes,
whenever this gets dropped, 2 days after this recording.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
So we're halfway through.
Here's what I wanted to ask you about the algorithms and all that. Was the president always going to be like a full-on android, or was there other concepts for how to introduce the algorithm decision making and that kind of thing? Like, I don't know, maybe put a prop in there that like references a system of geniuses that use an algorithm or something instead.
I think it was always androids from the very beginning, if I recall. I think that just kind of just kind of stemmed from, again, like, we wanted an android story that, again, kind of falls in that middle, that gray area of like, could she be, she's not totally evil, she's not totally good either, and, oftentimes, in my opinion, oftentimes that's quite like technology, it can be good or bad. It's sometimes just depends on the context and how much we accept it in our lives or how we use it.
Yeah. I guess my other question too is the artwork. I really like the artwork in this. It's really cool, like it does a good job of representing everything. All the characters are very consistent, like down to like braided hair and stuff. Like it's always the same. And I was like, it's not like, I don't know, it's like not the most bombastic artwork I've ever seen, but the consistency is incredible. And the story that it's telling, it does such a good job with, like never do I feel confused or if I'm missing anything. So how does the artwork come into everything? I don't remember who does it, but how did y'all work all of that out?
Go ahead.
Tina, you want to take that or you want me to take that one? I mean, again, we'll definitely pass on the compliments to the artists. We've just basically had a giant stable of artists. We knew going in, like with 30 issues, it would have been impossible to just have the same team over and over again. It's just not a realistic expectation. And some things were just a little bit out of our control where, we've had to, change artists or change teams, before an arc is done. I think that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to doing comic books. And so, it's kind of like how Tina and I did a lot of, research about, about the setting. We had to do our research in terms of looking for artists and finding, folks who are, have an interesting voice themselves, who can bring these words come to life. But at the same time, it's also not super fancy where it overtakes the story, because, there's kind of like a catchphrase in movies where it's like character-driven stories. And that's kind of a cliche, but it's also like, that is what we care. Ultimately, we cared about these characters. And so what mattered the most was like finding artists who could properly like show the emotional state of these characters, because you've kind of pointed out earlier, Ryan, that both Tina and I have a background in film. And I think most of the time, most film, there's not that voiceover. There's not that voiceover narration. And, a lot of comic books, they tend to have, those, quote, I don't know what to call them, but, the boxes with all the narration in them, especially, in the early days of comic books. And, I forgot how we decided upon that, but we kind of intentionally stayed away from that, probably just through our own instincts and what we're used to. And so it was very important to get the right artist to be able to express the internal emotions of these characters in key moments, because we didn't have the luxury of diving into their heads and hearing Marla thinks blah, 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 blah. Instead, we had to see her emote that. So, greatly, we love all of our artists, and they've been fantastic through and through. And, it's just exciting to see. And it's exciting to see when a new artist jumps on board to see what new twist they put upon it. And it often surprises us.
Yeah, definitely. It's fun to bring them on board and see what they add to it. I mean, they've been different, but there's always been, whenever we bring in a new artist, we send them things like, this has to be like this. So it's so that we make sure there are consistencies, but also give them room to kind of have their own style. No one wants to walk in and be like, put your pencil to the, like, no one wants that. So we want to make sure they have room to kind of do their thing while sticking with what Delegates is, and down to colors and everything. And color was a big deal for us. It's one of the big parts of Delegates, is that we like it. We love the colors, and we want it to feel colorful, and skin tones are huge for us. We always, if we get a different colorist, we do have to go through and say, you got to look at the past, issues, because everybody's skin tone is different. And that was a fun challenge, I think, in the get-go for us, to make sure that skin tones were, not everybody has the same skin tone. They all might be from Africa. It doesn't mean that they all have the same skin tone. So we are very much always trying to be very kind of respectful or faithful to making sure that all of our, there's not just one color for all our characters. It's like they all have a variant in their skin tone. So it was a fun challenge. And I think it was a fun challenge definitely for a lot of our colorists, because, they don't get that opportunity very often. So they don't have a lot of people of color in comics. And so when they had that, they were like, yeah, Aminah has to be this, and we will send them, and Aminah's this, Marla's this, Saito's this, and so that we always got that right, because it's, I think, in mainstream comics, usually it's just like one color for Caucasian, one color for Black people, one color for the Asian kid, and it's like,
I mean, and
different.
Credit to what you're saying there. There was actually a point where it goes back over to Inez, and she's like she's in like the TV studio or something, right? And whenever that it switches to that scene, her skin tone popped out to me so much. I was like, wow, I didn't realize how few like lighter skinned characters there are in this. Like it actually caught me off guard. I was like, because like never once did I question when there was like just panels full of the African people and the black skin tone, but whenever it switched over to Inez, I was like, oh yeah, like there are like non-black people here. And I don't even realize it, until it changes, like all of a sudden that contrast, it really brought it into focus. And I was like, yeah, this is not like most other comics. Like there's not this many people with dark skin in any one comic that I think I've ever read. So, I mean, ton of credit there because, we're talking about like being character driven, and it is like every character like stands out to me. They all kind of like have their own voice as well as their own visual cues and stuff. They're very well acted, but just like the diversity of the cast it's really interesting, and it does come through when you're reading it, even if you don't actively realize it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. That's good.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff, and I really enjoyed it. I really like what you guys did with this because it feels like something very different from what we traditionally get in the United States.
Yeah, that was definitely a little part of the plan for us to I love telling stories about things I don't know, like in a world I don't know. And obviously coming into this, I was kind of more of the character writer, and Ben definitely knew a lot more stuff about automation and the rest that sometimes I would be writing an issue and I'm like, is it possible for this to happen? I'm like, and he'd have to tell me, because I'm like, I don't know, I guess I'll try this, and you'll have to tell me, Ben, if this is actually possible or not. And so kind of it was great to have him to like guide me on all the kind of computer nerd stuff. And and I would just be like, my characters need to do this, So, I would make sure that the characters are on point. But I learned a lot about computers and such during this whole thing. I think because I did research and then been telling me whether what I was trying to do was possible or not, and kind of going from there. But it's fun.
Yeah, and likewise, as Tina said, I was, I guess, sort of the more big ideas person, but without really putting much, hadn't quite figured out the puzzle in terms of like who are the characters, which are the right characters to use to tell the story. And I remember the early days, Tina was great at just constantly poking holes at these ideas, and often asking like, why would this character do this? Because it was easy to just say like, oh yeah, we're going to have this awesome thing where this character does this and to that character, but it's important that we buy into why they do it, because ultimately, we both, Tina and I, agreed like if there was only one thing the reader was going to take away from this, it was hoping that it would be these characters would stay in their hearts forever. That's a lofty goal, but that's it's a goal. And credit goes to Tina for constantly pushing constantly pushing and making sure everything stays grounded within these characters. Does it make sense for Marla to do this because she's from her American upbringing? Does it make sense for OC to do this because he's lived in a country where it's been coup after coup and corrupted leader after corrupted leader? Like, he's going to think differently about how other people interact with each other, and it's about these relationships. And it was a great challenge to have like this great these 30 issues where there's room for these characters to, whether it's to argue or to just talk or to rub against each other, to better know about these characters.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of what makes them stick is how well grounded the characters are, because I think one of my favorite scenes, I don't remember exactly how it all plays out, but you see with Kessa, he has the opportunity to kind of get what he wants, but he ends up saving face. And he basically says like, I love my country, like this is the motherland, and this is what I stand for, and even though he could have got what he wanted in that moment, he chose not to rob them because it wouldn't be good for the country, and I think that's what's incredible. That's what makes those characters stick. Like, I don't know him, but I can relate to that, like you learn to love the place you're from and the place you live, you know, and sometimes we make sacrifices for the ones we love, and that's all relatable, you know, and it all comes down in that moment.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. I mean, yeah, I mean, Wakessa's basically, you know, he's unfortunately probably in this current economy is, just he was an everyday farmer, and the things turned for, he felt like he had to turn to, become a bandit to make, to make a living. And then this extraordinary event occurs, and he's got to make a decision about that. Hopefully, I don't think I don't know a lot of bandits, farmers who turn bandits, but I think we do know, especially in this economy, like folks who are either, job insecure or don't have a job, like where do they turn to if, the safety net isn't there, or whatever, they don't have the support system, and it's folks like Wakessa that we wanted to feature a lot, because again, it's like, and not to keep going back to Black Panther, but Black Panther is great and fantastical and inspirational, but they're superheroes, right? Mm-hmm. And here we also wanted to have stories where we hopefully respectfully portrayed farmers, fishermen, technicians, folks who are just living a regular day, living a regular life.
Yeah, we do have a lot of those supporting characters that we are very, very much wanting to have in them to feel realistic, and they add to our story. They give us. It's not just about our leads. It's about these other people around in this country, because it's about all depending how far you've gotten, it's about one or two bigger countries. So it's important. It was important for us to show what that whole world is like, not just these little, these characters, but the other people that inhabit that country, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I really bonded with Osi. I thought he was a great character because he's a company man. He's seen the rise and the fall of the country. He's not worried about all of that. Like, he just wants to get paid so he can like take care of his family and stuff, and then they come in for the president. He's like, well, this is my job, and he's going to keep doing it. But you can tell like he's not as bought in as somebody like Marla. Marla is, she's she's the guiding light, I guess. She's trying to do the right thing no matter what, and so that makes her a good character to follow. But you have Osi here, who's like a company man that's trying to do his job, but he's not trying to get overly involved. You have Wakessa over here, and he was just a farmer that fell on bad circumstances, and now he's doing what he has to do. And you meet the little girl in the first one, and there's just like, I don't know, there's a lot of little characters here and there that like I recognize their shirt color and stuff, and I'm like, okay, that guy's been in the background here, and here, and I mean, that's credit to you guys as the writers and your art team for telling a story that has like such well-grounded characters. I mean, they're all relatable in some way.
I really appreciate the
compliment. Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, whenever y'all reached out to me, I was like, okay, well, let me go read the book on Comixology, because I think y'all had mentioned that. So I'm like, well, let me go check it out and see what it even is. And I started reading, and I was like, I'm not really sure what it's about. And then, like I said, once I hit that second issue, like I was in. I pretty much read the whole first, the first trade, I guess, the first volume. Yeah. I read that like in an hour, maybe an hour and a half, probably less though. Like, I just sat there and read it because once I hit that second issue and I realized like all the layers that were being kind of brought up to the surface there, I was like, this is really cool. And so I went all the way through it, and then over like the next 2 or 3 days, I read it kind of like issue by issue. And then just the other day, I started the second one, and I'm like 2 or 3 issues into that one. And so, I mean, touching on that second issue as well, or the second volume as well, is all the characters change, and it's super obvious, but not like I don't know. It's not like a movie where you pick up the sequel and it's like, well, the character's completely different because they need something to grow over the course of this. Like, in the second volume of this, like you kind of get all these events right there in that first issue that kind of shows you the characters don't change, but like their positions in relation to each other are a little bit different because of things that are exposed in that first issue, you know? So I really like the way that you set up like a second volume and a second story arc, because it doesn't feel like we're just resetting the character for the sequel movie. It actually feels like a progression of the character. Like they've overcome all of these circumstances. Now we're going to grow them more instead of like regressing and regrowing, you know? So I'm excited to finish it. I'm really excited to see where it goes from there. And then it sounds like you'll have a third volume out already.
Well, first of all, I'm glad I didn't accidentally spoiler anything from the second arc. But we're halfway done on the third arc. Issue 15, as Tina mentioned, will be dropping very soon. I know that issues we're all the way up to issue 17 in the pipeline, being worked on as we speak. So optimistically, we may finish the third arc probably by in the first half of 2021, and get a volume out there as well. So if folks want to like read the 6 issues all in one sitting, it'll be there available for them. So yeah, and yeah, that's the plan, is to just keep chugging away and work on the next arc. And we have all the scripts are all done. It's just a matter of getting working with the artists, reviewing and giving them feedback and whatnot. And yeah, it's this is kind of the fun part where we get to see this stuff really come to life.
Yeah, that was fun for the first time when we got to see the characters actually become characters. We had written out all of the issues before we even, or did we? I feel like we wrote a ton of them before we started with the artist. So
I don't remember the exact timeline, but I think there was a little bit of overlap with it. But yeah,
it's fun to see your characters come to life, and we've had such good luck with artists. So they've contributed so much to this series for sure.
That's awesome. Who are y'all? Are y'all publishing through somebody? Are you self-publishing? How are you releasing the book? How does it get out there?
First it's digitally through Comixology and Comixology Online. They have, they are pretty independent, they're independent friendly. We don't have our own publisher. So, we obviously did our rounds trying to reach out to independent, friendly, comic studios, or distributors. And in the end, Comixology made the most sense, in terms of, having a large platform out there, and us being able to, just submit, on our own time. We had been looking, and in terms of getting it out in print, there's a distributor or printer out in the United Kingdom called Artist Merrick. It's hard to spell, but it's ARTITHEMIC.
Yeah.
Got it on the first try. They're kind of like a print on demand.
Yeah.
Print on demand. Okay. Yeah. So in that sense, they're also independent friendly, where we submitted to them and they accepted us. For that one, it's because it's print on demand. The per issue cost is probably going to be more than you would expect from like a DC, Marvel, those studios who can afford to just print out 10,000 on bulk, but we're glad, we're super stoked to have, that they accepted us, because, while it's exciting, to be in digital, and, that's the future. There's still folks who just simply want the paper comic book in their hands. And hopefully, Artist Merrick, now they have an option to have that feeling. So we're super stoked that we're available in both formats.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have y'all ever heard of Gumroad?
I have not.
I have
No?
not either, but I will have to
Yeah.
look it up.
Oh, it's
Yeah, what is
it's pretty cool. It's like a I think they started with comics and now they kind of expanded out, but it would be sort of in the vein of like Etsy, I guess, where
Huh?
like you can kind of set up a shop for
Huh.
like I said, it kind of started with comics as far as I understand. So you can set up a shop there and people would come and buy your book and you can set up like your print on demand links and everything. So
Oh,
somebody can go there and they can buy the digital copy or the print copy, and that would be forwarded out to the print on demand company and they would send it to your purchaser. And it's kind of, from what I understand, at least, I haven't used it myself other than to buy some books, but from what I understand, there's a little bit better shares as far as like cuts of the profits and everything like that through them versus like Comixology and stuff. I think they take a less percentage or something like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, y'all might be interested in that
yeah.
too. Again, it started with comics, or at least that's how I've come to know it. So it might even increase readership, oddly, because people,
Yeah.
when they hear Gumroad, they know what's going on, you know?
Oh, thanks for the tip. We'll definitely look that up for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to go with the, get more of the UK. We thought that readership might enjoy our, delegates as well. So it's part of why we had picked them too, because we're hoping to expand out internationally, because I think it would take off internationally.
Mhm.
So hopefully that'll be the case. But
Yeah, that's awesome. How often are y'all doing an issue of it? Do you know? Is there like a pretty regular frequency or?
is it it probably ends up being every 2 months though, you think, Ben? Yeah.
That's been about the average. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
Yeah.
There's independent creators and stuff doing like 1 to 4 issues a year, so you're definitely on the high end of that. So
We're trying. We're getting there. We weren't in the beginning, but we're getting there now. So we definitely are getting there.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it helps to have great professional artists do it. I'm assuming sometimes these independent creators, they're often doing their own art, so it makes a lot of sense that it takes up so much time, because just watching the output of some of these artists, how fast they turn things around at a high quality, it's just super impressive for them to do it issue after issue. And oftentimes, they'd be slowed down by us because I have to double check this little consistency issue or something like that, and just Tina and I obviously need to go back and forth and collating our comments so that we can give them a consistent feedback, and so sometimes we're a stickler for like, no, it should be this color. Sometimes we're a little bit of a stickler for that. So, but in general, like, we've been averaging close, maybe slightly under two months for each issue, and we've it's been great to have that pace where hopefully we'll get 5-6 issues out every year for the next couple of years, and hopefully it'll help continue to grow that readership.
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed with what y'all are doing because this is it's well done. Like I said, I mean, I think all that I've said kind of proves my point. It's a really cool book. It's got like a lot of like I hate to say like political thriller because I think everybody's tired of politics at this point, but there is like a political structure that they're playing within, and to me it's kind of got the thriller vibes. Like there's a lot of tension and stuff being built, plenty of action, a lot of great character moments, so there's like elements of drama sprinkled in there. I mean, it's not quite Forrest Gump, but it crosses a lot of genres. There's a lot to be read in there.
Definitely appreciate that you saw that in there. Because definitely I think and again, that's the beauty of having 30 issues out there is like we have the room to grow it out there, to sometimes go down these paths. But yeah, definitely, you know, I mean, this is probably too much insider baseball, but you know, I think we finished writing everything pretty much in 2015. So, we know,
yeah,
or you know, just near the
yeah.
no, sorry, near the end of 2016. But like, I'm kind of glad that like, you know, we already knew where the story went before, you know, how
before 2020 happened, and kind of influenced what you
or
would
even you know, before even, you know, the 2016 election obviously was jarring for a lot of folks, you know, and I'm glad that we had already, you know, kind of set the path ourselves, so we weren't going to have a knee-jerk reaction to, you know, just how, you know, how unprecedented that, you know, the results were for that. So I think
it
that
almost,
was
it almost felt like you were kind of like writing into fantasy, and then fantasy came true, and you had to like fix it all, you know. I feel like so many people were like, "What if this crazy thing happened?" And then that crazy thing happened, and they were like, "Oh crap!" Like comedians, you know, they're like, it got really hard to do comedy after he won the election because then it wrote itself, you know. It takes all the fun out of it, you know. So.
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely heard that too.
Okay, so when is the next issue of this due out? Do y'all have a release date for that? Oh, you said the 6th, right?
Yeah, if Comixology is, and they're usually quite dependable. You know, not to throw shade at Comixology, but you know, January 6th is it should be available. Probably in the late mornings, depending on your time zone. But you know, obviously, we'll make sure, you know, to let folks know on social media, and you know, yeah, hopefully about every 2 months, hopefully you know, there'll be a new issue out available on Comixology, and you know, for folks to check out.
And where can we find you guys? Y'all Twitter, Instagram users, no social media, all the social media.
I guess I'll just start with the plugs for the Delegate stuff. We're on Delegates Comic, I think, with singular, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We have a Facebook page for that. Me personally, you know, I don't do too much social media. I guess now I have an Instagram since I now have cats, so I'm now obligated to show pictures of them. But if you're interested, you can find me on Instagram at ImagineBin, and my website is imaginebin.com.
And mine is all my name. So on Twitter, it's Tina Cesa Ward. On Instagram, it's Tina Cesa Ward, and then website tinacesaward.com. Just made it simple.
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I had a blast talking with you guys. This will be out on Sunday, I believe. So I'll make sure to tweet and share all the links for the new issue. And I guess the important thing I want to express to everybody is if you have Amazon Prime or you have Comixology Unlimited with or without Prime, go check out the Delegates. I know there's at least 2 volumes on there, and so that's like 12 issues. There's a lot of great information there. There is a really awesome story, great character moments, all the things we've been talking about. And it's really got its finger on the pulse of, you know, the world right now, how crazy it can get and how much we do and don't know. But again, it's asking more questions than giving answers. So I think it's a really cool book. Everybody should check that out.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you for your time.
No problem. Thank you all.